All right, we were having some technical difficulties, so sorry about that. But we are joined by the lovely Liz Loza, the fantasy football girl, the fantasy football guru. We're so very fortunate to have her as part of our sisterhood. Liz, thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much. It's a pleasure to be here. You know I love talking football with the ladies.
Oh, you're just beautiful, and we're so happy. We're so happy to be able to sit and talk to you face to face. Now, tell us just real quick how you got into fantasy football.
Sure. Well, I was raised by a single mom. So while she was at work, my grandfather was actually my primary caregiver. So I grew up learning all of the things that like boys, I use that word in quotes, technically, generally learn. So I always was a football fan as a way for him and I to bond. Sadly, he passed away when I was 18 and toward the end of football season. So it was a way to grieve and process all of that. Since he was pretty much like my father, I just watched every single game that I could, right? Like not just the Bears, but every single football game to be close to him. Shortly thereafter, I started dating a guy who was in this thing called a fantasy football league that I had never heard of before. And he would watch all of the games, as now those of us who play fantasy know is typical. So he knew that I liked watching all of the games since it had sort of become a tradition for me. And he started asking me for my advice. And I ended up managing that SOB's team to a Super Bowl victory.
Nice.
And said, forget this. I want in on the league. So there happened to be an opening. I was the only girl. The guys let me in. I won the Super Bowl that year. They all said it was
for you.
Yeah, they all said it was beginner's luck. I went back and repeated with another victory the second year I was in the league. And then I thought I really like this. I'm good at this. There seemed to be not very many other women doing it, so I started my site called thefantasyfootballgirl.com as just a blog to learn more and dialogue with other football fans, females, men, didn't matter. And now I have a podcast and make appearances, and it's just sort of snowballed from there.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's very awesome. And one of the things that we here at NFL Female and at the Zone Blitz like to do is talk to women who have done that, have gotten out there and are doing it for themselves. Sonja and I have often discussed having that song as our theme song. Sisters are doing it for themselves. And sometimes you do have to make your own opportunities, right?
Right. Exactly.
Absolutely. And if you don't, I think we can't live in a world where we're afraid of things, right? So I make calls some weeks that are wrong. I thought Keenan Allen was going to have a bigger game than he did on Monday night. I was wrong. All right. But so are all the the male analysts don't make calls any more or less. No. And, none of us have crystal balls. So I feel like it's okay to get out there. The love of the game, the spirit, the ability to entertain and connect with other people. Whether you're a mom who's into, I don't know, making cake balls or football, like just get out there and do and put it out there. And, I think if you're doing what you love and you love what you do, then other people are going to be attracted to it naturally.
Yeah, I completely agree. Let me ask you this, and then I'll kick it over to Sonja, and she can let Gwen ask questions. But I am curious. I know the answer to this because I've talked to Liz, so I'm cheating just a little bit. But there are all kinds of different fantasy football leagues out there. Do you have a preference?
Well, it depends on how well my regular redraft league would be my favorite. Now, if that team or those teams start to falter, if I was off on my draft picking and I'm working the waiver wire like crazy, this would be a couple of weeks in, right? Then all of a sudden daily fantasy becomes very interesting because I can just play, all the players starting on Sunday, but still have that fantasy adrenaline pumping, but not be committed to this team that I drafted when everybody was healthy and all we had to go on was a preseason sample. Dynasty is interesting. I know, Sharona, you play in a couple of Dynasty leagues, so I like managing a team, building it sort of like an actual NFL team, or more similarly to an actual NFL team would do. What I really want to get into, and I haven't done yet, is a rookie, like all rookies league.
Ooh,
so I think that would be really interesting and fun, but that I think is my next level if I can find one of those leagues. And then now, even the typical redraft leagues have such interesting settings with 2 quarterback leagues or super flexes or numerous flexes. So there's always some evolution to keep you on your toes and keep your strategy improving season to season.
Do you play daily fantasy?
I do. I like it.
It sounds like a lot of work.
I think it's less work because, on Sunday morning, half an hour before the games start, you can just sort of be like, all right, I like that guy, I like that guy, I like that guy, and you set it and forget it. Listen, there are some people who are crunching numbers and know all these crazy algorithms like poker to beating it. I just think it's fun to play in a couple of tournaments. Some entry fees are as little as $2. Some are free. So, yeah, I mean, I just sort of think it's fun because I don't have to be married to those guys. They're like my fantasy boyfriends, not my fantasy
Mm-hmm.
All right, Sonja, I'm going to let you weigh in and ask Liz some questions, and I know Gwen has probably got some, and then we'll finish up with maybe some late round sleepers, or not late round, but some waiver wire guys to keep an eye on.
Yeah, that'd be good. So tell me, who are some of your sleeper picks for the entire year? Who are some of the guys who you think could be coming out of left field this year?
Sure. Well, I think Carson Palmer is someone that I've been high on since the draft. I think, Sharona, I mentioned him to you before. He wasn't drafted in a ton of leagues because there's so much depth at quarterback and because he's considered an old man.
Yeah.
But he went 24 of 37 passes for 304 yards and 2 touchdowns on Monday night.
Huge.
It was a pretty slow first 3 quarters, but then he got things in rhythm. So I think that I waited on quarterback, and so I think, and I'm glad that I did. I ended up with Carson Palmer in a lot of leagues. His O-line looks like it's recovered a bit, so I think that he's just going to be slinging it a lot. Also, someone to watch is rookie running back also on the Cardinals, Stephon Taylor. He's the backup to Andre Ellington, who did play on Monday, but he just had that foot injury, and there was an MRI on it, and there was question as to whether or not it would be in a boot for a couple of weeks, but he decided to go ahead and play on it. But it's just a reminder, even though he did play, of his fragility, and it was Stephon Taylor, since Ellington played on a limited basis, that ended up with, I believe, at least 1, perhaps 2 touchdowns. He had a really nice preseason as well, so I think that Stephon Taylor has some appeal moving forward. Who else do I like? Let's see, I think Garrett Graham.
He looked nice last night. He really did.
Right, right. I think Garrett Graham is a tight end. I just wrote an article and posted it on the fantasyfootballgirl.com about 3 tight ends to potentially tap because we've had a couple of injuries at the upper echelon elite tight end tier. Garrett Graham did not play in week 1 for the Texans because of a back injury, but he's questionable for week 2, and I think he's a sneaky pick. I really like him if you're handcuffing him to a riskier play, like if you had Jordan Reed, for example, who has durability issues but is out now. If he might be a nice handcuff to a guy like that, or to Gronk if you're worried about Gronk and his ability to stay healthy. So he's another one for the season that I think could get you 6, working with his quarterback is Ryan Fitzpatrick. That guy's going to check down. That works really well for Graham, and he is the lead tight end there now that Owen Daniels has been reunited with Kubiak in Baltimore. And how can I not mention this guy, one of my favorite vintage, in fact, NFL Female, this article that I wrote was posted on NFL Female, is Steve Smith, one of my favorite vintage.
He made me so mad on my bench, had just a great day.
I did.
Oh, that made me so mad.
But he looks rejuvenated. He's got a huge chip on his shoulder, and I know we're going to talk about the Ravens situation later, but I think, everyone's focusing on the running backs there. Let's talk about it from a football lens right now, but everyone's talking about the running back situation. I think they might end up having to pass more because it's a bit muddled in the backfield.
I agree with that.
I'm sorry, not Ray Rice. Steve Smith gives me some potential. I think he's someone who is going to be an incredible value for where you drafted him, if you drafted him, and if you didn't and he's on your waiver wire, stash that beast because I really have a good feeling about him this season.
Well, thank God for that. I'm happy about that one. We had a question earlier from our Cleveland reporter. She asked me about our running backs. Now that Ray Rice is gone, did I think that Bernard Pierce was, going to be benched, or was the was he still in the doghouse with the coach? Now, the coach gave him one chance last week. He fumbled. He sat on the bench. And Justin Forsett stepped up. So she asked about Justin Forsett, and then I thought, don't forget about Lorenzo Taliafiero. I'm still having trouble saying that name. We didn't get to see a lot of him that day, but what did you think of him in preseason compared to what you think Justin Forsett's going to do?
Well, I think it's interesting, and I'm going to be honest, I know a lot of fantasy experts like to come out and be very definitive, but I like to say when I don't know something. And I feel like, so everyone's going to look to Thursday night's game against the Steelers, right? But I feel like that's a not accurate sample size because running backs traditionally do not do well on Thursday night football. No one knows for sure why. Maybe it's because of the short turnaround and it being such a volatile position. Traditionally, tight ends, however, do well on Thursday night football. So, Bernard Pierce is only 23 years old. It's not like he's some 28-year-old who's reached the end of his career. He fumbled. He got into the doghouse. How many chances has Stephon Ridley gotten in New England? Now, granted, Shane Vereen, got many more chances, but that's up until this point. How many chances did David Wilson get in New York until he finally injured himself to the point of having to retire? I feel like one fumble, that was Bernard Pierce's first career fumble. Is Harbaugh really going to bench him? I think we might be overreacting.
That was very strange.
I think he's pretty much already said today that he will start. He's going to start, and I think it's just he's going to have to prove himself again. Bernard's just been plagued with injuries over and over again, but he's supposedly healthy as he can be now.
I also think if you look at Justin Forsett, a lot of people are high on him because he worked with Kubiak, your new offensive coordinator, back in Houston, but he didn't do a whole lot for Cougs. Now, granted, Arian Foster and Ben Tate kind of owned the backfield then, but Kubiak runs a zone blocking offense and like zone blocking running backs. Lorenzo Taliafiero fits better into a power blocking scheme. So but Justin Forsett is a better back for Kubiak's scheme. So everyone's pointing to Taliafiero, and I feel like we're putting the cart ahead of the horse a little bit. I think Pierce is probably going to start. He's going to work well. As long as he can hold on to the ball, he's going to be the Ravens' starting running back, and Forsett will be the change of pace guy moving forward.
Hey, Brad, I went ahead and brought Brad Wells in, who is our next guest. Brad, we're going to finish up with our fantasy football talk, but I didn't want you to be sitting there waiting on us. Thanks for joining us. We're talking to Liz Loza, the fantasy football girl. Liz, who are your start sits for this coming week?
Well, Sharona, I think you're going to like my first start a lot. It's Jake Locker.
Yeah. Yeah. Look, I had Jake Locker on my bench and started Tony Romo, and that ended up being a terrible decision.
Yes.
Oh, well, this week though, the Cowboys, Tony Romo's Cowboys, are coming to you in Tennessee.
They are.
So I feel like Jake Locker is he looks pretty sharp and confident. I like his chances against that awful defense. I think Doug Martin is a big sit this week. He's already injured his ankle. I believe it's his ankle or knee. I don't remember which. And they've got the Rams. Now, the Rams did look awful against Minnesota in week one, but I don't know. I just think that whole Buccaneers crew is – I was never high on Josh McCown because I don't believe that Lovie Smith can return an investment on a franchise quarterback, and I think that McCown's success was mostly due to Mark Trestman when he was in Chicago than himself so much. So I'm sitting Doug Martin. Those are two big ones. Phillip Rivers and the entire, like Ryan Matthews had a great game on Monday night, so I know a lot of people are going to be hot on him, but he's got the Seahawks. I'm sold. Like, if you're starting against the Seahawks, I'm sitting you.
Exactly. And that was going to be one of my questions. Do you think you can really start anybody against a team like Seattle with that defense and things like that?
They really looked good.
They did.
I think it depends. Like, in week one, I got a lot of people asking me if they should start Randall Cobb. And I was like, yes, he's your wide receiver one. He is playing in Seattle against the Seahawks. But you drafted him in probably your second or third round, depending on your strategy or your format.
Right.
So you are expecting him to perform. Now, Aaron Rodgers wasn't able to, but let's also take a look at the fact that the Seahawks perform much better at home than they do on the road, particularly Russell Wilson, right? So I think given the matchup and whether it's a home, away, and given the player and their level of eliteness, if you will, then I do think you can match that a bit. But even though the Seahawks are traveling to San Diego, I'm not starting Ryan Matthews. That backfield has a lot of mouths to feed in it, so that's one I would warn against too. And I think another sneaky start might be another Titan actually. Delaney Walker.
Delaney Walker. I knew that was going to come up.
Your boo.
Delaney. Yeah. I have him in two, maybe. He might have been on my bench in one of them. I started him in 2 leagues this weekend, and he came up huge for me. So, yeah.
He's not going to get that many looks, but as you know, Sharona Wisenhunt was a tight end coach for the first decade of his career.
He makes the most of his targets. He really does. He's very efficient with his targets.
I think Locker's going to like him in the end zone a lot. So he'll probably get you 6, maybe not more. I mean, he's not sexy in PPR, but I think he'll get you the touchdowns on a more consistent basis than any of those other middle-of-the-pack tight ends might.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. You said something that I want to ask you about, and then I know we want to talk real quick about the Ray Rice situation, but I have to ask, are you one of those strict play-your-stud fantasy football players, or do you play matchups?
I think you have to give respect to the matchup, but at the end of the day, if I am reaching for a matchup, I've learned my lesson too many times. If I'm reaching for a matchup, like if Calvin Johnson has a bad matchup, I'm starting Calvin Johnson.
Sure.
Yeah.
You know? So I think that there are some weeks, for the most part, to answer your question, I will usually start my studs with respect to the matchup, and I will try, if I know my stud has a not-so-favorable matchup, find upside at a flex position and kind of reach to make up for points there. Does that make sense?
Well, we're going to ask Brad about this too. The Ray Rice news is churning all over the place. There are, and I know that you're very familiar, Liz, and there are calls for Roger Goodell to either step down or to be terminated. That sounds so Arnold Schwarzenegger. I don't mean it in that sense.
No, I know.
Yeah.
I know what you mean.
Yeah, to be terminated by the owners as the commissioner. Would you like to weigh in on that?
Brad or me?
You, Liz.
Oh, me. Okay. I think as a woman, this is a pretty loaded topic, and I've tried to toe the line. I went on another radio show a couple of weeks ago, before the release of Ray Rice and the second video was released, and I said, he asked the host, and this was a pretty big radio show.
This game Chicago, wasn't it?
Yeah. You're right. Yeah, it was. And he asked me if there were any players that I was avoiding. I think I tweeted this to you particularly. There were any players that I was avoiding for any reason, no matter where they fell to me. And I mentioned Ray Rice for moral reasons, and I caught a bunch of hell on Twitter about it. People saying, oh, that's so stupid, da-da-da-da-da. And I was like, listen, I just don't want to be personally invested in this guy's success.
I completely agree.
You know? It's a game. It's fun. I'm not in any crazy high-stakes league. I'm not going to Vegas with my fantasy squad you know? So I don't want to root for him. And I think that, and now, by the way, I was right.
Yeah, it turned out. Look.
Yes, you were. Yes, you were.
Ultimately, you go with your gut. I mean, don't you think, Liz and Brad? I mean, you have to go with your gut.
I think that's true. I also think that if there is a silver lining to come out of this, it's the fact that I've seen so many men in particular have raged towards the way the league handled it, to Ray Rice's indifference after, I don't even like saying it out, after hitting his then fiance. Like, it's been a little bit heartening to see so many men feel so strongly in a woman's favor. And the fact that this dialogue can be open. The one thing I will say that I found a little bit disconcerting were some people saying, well, if he's forgiven her, if she's forgiven him rather, then why shouldn't we? And that's when, like, Twitter becomes not so useful for this conversation, because it's much more complex than 140 characters can provide, right? So the psyche of a victim cannot be summed up in, well, she said it's cool. And, but I do think I'm happy to see this dialogue open, and Goodell is one of the most, calculating people that I think is in existence, Machiavellian almost. His handling of this has blown up in his face. I don't think that he's going to resign, but I do think that respect has to be given to the fact that over 40% of the NFL viewing audience is now women, and we're not going to buy that purple jersey.
Yeah, here. I completely agree. Liz, thanks for joining us. Tell our viewers where they can find you. And we didn't give you a chance early on, but give a big shout out to your fabulous website.
Oh, I will. Thank you, guys. You can find me on Twitter at @TheFFGirl, and you can go to my website. Like I said, there's a tight ends article on there right now at thefantasyfootballgirl.com. And if you like, you can check out my podcast. It's available on iTunes. It's called the X's and Y's Podcast, a his and hers guide to fantasy football.
It's very good. It's extremely good. One of the best in the business. Thanks again, Liz, for joining us. We hope that you'll come back. You are our fantasy guru, so we rely on you for advice.
Yes.
Thanks so much, ladies. Win big.
Thank you.
Have a great week.
Thanks. Bye, Liz.
Bye.
Well, Brad, thanks for joining us. We had a little bit of technical. It would not be the Zone Blitz without some technical issues. Sorry that.
It wouldn't be Google Plus without technical issues.
This is true. Let's talk some NFL. We definitely want you to weigh in on the Roger Goodell and Ray Rice situation. But we want to start with some other topics first. So let's talk about this new revised drug policy. At the last time I had heard, there was not any. I was just checking real quick. No reports on whether or not that it's actually been voted on. But you're familiar with the details, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm familiar with, I think, sort of the high-level stuff and how it's basically going to affect marijuana, how the league treats marijuana, and how it might retroactively allow certain people that have been suspended back into the league, such as Wes Welker.
Well, first of all, let's ask about the first part, the revision of the policy itself. I'll get that out in a minute. It's been a day. They're going to, and they really. I was not aware that the testing level was so low, and it really is. If you're not familiar, the testing level that the NFL uses for marijuana is incredibly low, and they're going to raise that. I think that that's a good development, don't you, Brad?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, marijuana use is legal in certain states now. So
it's going to become more and more legal.
Right.
Yeah, and in two of the states that I'm aware of, there are actual NFL teams, good NFL teams, the teams that just represented the NFL in the Super Bowl.
Yes.
It's legal in those two states to smoke and ingest marijuana. So it's important, I think, to raise that level. I think with certain people like maybe Josh Gordon, I think a lot of people are sort of using him as the example of somebody that, they should let him back in the league. Someone like Gordon, and I'm not so in on that. Guy's failed multiple drug tests.
Yeah, I think that's the problem. But for guys who are first-time offenders, or maybe even second-time offenders, obviously it should not be as harsh as it is right now. So I think it's a step in the right direction. Yeah, it is going to be interesting to see how they iron out all of these details, because there are guys in the program that we don't know about, and we shouldn't know about. The secrecy issue is beyond the scope of what we're going to be able to talk about, because we're not going to have time. But it is. I can't wait to see what they do with Josh Gordon. How do you feel if they were to apply it retroactively to Wes Welker?
I'd have no problem with it. I mean, if Welker didn't do anything wrong, when he was tested initially, and now they've changed the policy, why not make it retroactive? It's not like, again, to be honest with you, the drug policy stuff seems so tame right now. It almost seems trivial compared to the real issues that are affecting the NFL that you guys were just talking about a second ago with Liz before she left. That stuff is far more. That's probably why they haven't announced any sort of voting today or anything like that. there are some very deep-seated issues within the NFL that a lot of us are seeing right now that are really hard to sort of look at and go, now, wait a minute, why do I watch this game again? I mean, you're kind of, why do I give these people my money?
Yeah.
It's really
Let's go ahead and turn to that. Let's go ahead and turn to that. I think that is the big topic of discussion. We were going to talk about injuries, overwhelming number of injuries this weekend, but I agree with Brad. All of these things, and not to downplay at all some of the devastating injuries that some guys suffered, particularly in the Titans and Chiefs games. They lost 2 of their starters to Achilles tears.
Yeah, the Chiefs, Mike DeVito and Derek Johnson,
Yeah.
Both to Achilles injuries, I might add, which is the same injury that's ended Robert Mathis's season.
Yes, and we were going to talk some Colts at the end, but let's talk about the kind of the elephant in the room, the Ray Rice situation, the Roger Goodell situation. I want to pose the question to you, Brad, and then I'm going to just turn it over to Sonja and Gwen to ask questions too. A lot of calls for Roger Goodell to either voluntarily step down, which I personally do not think his ego would ever let him agree to, or for the owners to step in and ensure that he is no longer the commissioner of the National Football League. Is it realistic to think that Roger Goodell his job is in jeopardy?
I think it's realistic to say that Roger Goodell is under fire, and there are probably a few owners that are internally questioning whether or not he should retain his position in the NFL as commissioner. Obviously, I'm not talking to those specific owners. This is just me speculating. There's a tremendous amount of fire coming at them from the media, and this isn't just bloggers or people like us who are angry. The NFL tends to ignore the people and tends to put much more emphasis on advertising partners and on big media. And the problem that Roger Goodell has right now is that his advertising partners in big media are calling for him to resign. When guys like Keith Olbermann, when people on Fox, when people on, when they get up there and they're openly saying that not only should you go, but Jeff Pash should go, the owner, Ozzie Newsome should go. All of these people need to step down because for one of 2 reasons. They either lied, which you should lose your job for that. This is not something that you should lie about. Or number 2, you were incompetent, and you should lose your job for that because you can't screw something like this up. The problem that I have, to answer your question in general, Roger Goodell's not going to step down, and I don't think the owners as a majority are going to do anything to him. I've met Roger Goodell several times. I've interviewed Roger Goodell. Roger Goodell is an extremely intelligent guy, and he's actually very, very engaging to talk to. But one thing that Roger Goodell is extremely good at is making money for these billionaire owners who, at the end of the day, in my mind, they could care less about what Ray Rice did in an elevator to his fiancee. They could care less. They care only about the bottom line. And the bottom line is they're making a lot of money. So until they start losing money, Roger Goodell's job is safe. So one of the things that I've struggled with recently, the last couple of days, since this has come out, is, well, if me writing about the NFL, talking about the NFL, helps the NFL make money, and they're not willing to punish the people that really screwed this up, then I'm kind of complicit in it, which makes me feel very dirty. So my feeling about this is, and I'm really struggling with this theory, is that if you really, really want justice in this, you need to stop buying NFL stuff, stop wearing NFL stuff, and stop supporting the NFL so it starts to lose money, or it starts to really upset the sponsors that give a lot of money to the NFL, and then maybe the owners will finally do something to Roger Goodell, because I do think he should lose his job over this. He handled this extremely poorly, and I think right before you guys went on the air, He did an interview with CBS
Yes.
News, I think it was, and it was, I mean, the interviewer was a disgrace. It was a disgrace to journalism. Softball questions left and right. I mean, it was.
Well, that's the
it
only
was very
interview he would agree to do.
Right.
I know, and CBS, in my opinion, should have said no. We're not gonna. We're gonna grill
ask
you.
the real questions.
We're gonna ask real questions, and you know, if he doesn't agree to that, then he can go run to his network that he runs, and they can ask him softball questions. So I just think that it was the whole thing it's a failure on many fronts. And what's going to be interesting now is how media and journalism deal with it, because so much, and this is a totally different problem, but I think it's related in a certain way, so much of NFL journalism now, or NFL media, it's not journalism anymore. It's essentially PR. And you know, if you ruffle the feathers of the NFL, they cut you off from the money train, the gravy train. And this is going to be an interesting litmus test for a lot of journalists, a lot of people who cover the NFL as something that is worth covering, not just to make money for clicks and stuff like that, but because it needs to be covered as any other subject matter in journalism should be covered. So I think it's going to be an interesting thing going forward, because this is a very, very angry topic. And a lot of very, very dumb decisions have been made.
Yeah, I want to return to some of the thoughts that you just said. I do want to pass you around, as it will, to the other members of the panel.
I'll get prepared in my chair.
You're on the hot seat. I'm going to send you over to Sonja right now.
Okay, I don't throw softballs. I tease. But I guess my other question would be is that, you know, we've all talked about how women are becoming, like, we're about, what, 45% of the viewing broadcast. But what about, you know, the other 55 to 60% of guys whose women and, you know, wives, girlfriends, etc., kind of are on the fringe and don't really know? Because, like, some of my coworkers, I know I've talked about this with them, and they're like, well, what's going on and who's that? Like, how do you think that those types, you know, would respond? And, you know, do they include their wives and girlfriends in this discussion? You know, what do you think about that?
It obviously depends on the individual. It's a really good question. I know that with me, I saw the video, I was reading about it. I'm not writing about the NFL right now for anybody. I'm just basically a fan right now, which is a lot of fun, actually.
Yeah.
You know, it's fun when you don't have editors constantly telling you, hey, write this article and make sure that it has these search engine optimization things. It's great. I told my wife about it, and she saw the video, and obviously she's mortified. She has a deep-seated dislike of the NFL for a variety of reasons, so this is just one more reason for her to dislike the NFL. My friends see this, and their immediate reaction is Ray Rice is a scumbag. That's their immediate reaction. He's a scumbag. Right. Are they sharing that with their girlfriends, with their spouses? My instinct would be no, because you're opening things up there as a man. As I'll speak solely from the point of view of a man, because I'm not going to be dumb enough to even think about trying seeing anything from the point of view of a woman in this context, because it's, you know, I've never known what it's like to be attacked or abused in that way in a relationship. Have I been in abusive relationships before? Yeah. I mean, a lot of people are in abusive relationships. I've never been in a physically abusive relationship, which is a different level of abuse. So I'm 6'5", 200 pounds. There aren't too many 6'9", 250-pound women that are going to probably date me or marry me. So that's the context here. So, you know, when you start talking about that with your wife or girlfriend, you're opening things up, and I think with most men they're not comfortable with it, because what it forces them to do is to recognize, in many cases, not all cases, but I'm more physically powerful than you are, you being the woman. And at some point, that can get scary. And you have to recognize that and be sensitive to it. And I think that a lot of men just aren't sensitive to that. And, and it's to be fair to them, we're kind of not taught to be that way, especially when it comes to football. I mean, come on, with football, it's about suck it up, deal with it, put your big boy pants on. You don't have a concussion, you just got a dinger, that kind of thing.
Right.
It's all part of it. So that's why this is such a very tricky and very, very important issue, because it puts a foot right through all of the barriers that are put up.
There are definitely levels to the discussion, and I want to talk to Gwen about this, because Gwen is our Baltimore Ravens reporter, and I know that it has to be hard to have your team, kind of be on the spotlight for this, and I will say this: I don't often reveal this, but I revealed it on my radio show this morning. And so I'm becoming a lot more comfortable revealing it. But I am a domestic violence survivor. I have been where Janae Palmer is sitting right now. Except that my entire personal life did not get dragged through the media. I can't imagine what she's going through. My heart goes out to her. I can't imagine how she feels. I do not know that I think Ray Rice is a scumbag. I think Ray Rice did a despicable act. I think that, and I'm saying this to Gwen, because I think that there are exceptions, obviously. There are some extremely bad people in the world. But most people have good sides and bad sides. None of us are perfect. We all have those things. There are bad parts to us and good parts to us. Now, I don't know that I believe that Ray Rice, this was an isolated incident, having seen that videotape. I do not think that it was an isolated incident, and I can speak from experience because of the blasé way in which he reacted. Gwen, how difficult was it to watch your team go through this?
I was saying, and I wrote an article today, it was almost like there was a death, because you have the initial shock. We all knew what had happened, why she was being drugged out of that elevator. Mm-hmm. But seeing that left hook, and she went down, and he just was like,
it was like he was inconvenienced.
Like, it was like, oh God, here I go again.
Exactly.
So I don't think it was the first time. I think that was their relationship. In my opinion, doesn't make it right that it happened. But seeing that was the shocker for me. That made it so real and so uncomfortable to watch. I had people coming into my office and talking about it, and because I was shocked at first at the amount of women that I knew that were like, maybe she needed a beating. Maybe she needed to be hit.
That just makes the hair on the back of my
head. Oh my goodness.
That maybe it's Baltimore. I don't know. But it was, men were furious and they were pissed and they were calling for his resignation and him to be fired. And women were like, she spit on that man. My spit on me to go, I expect them to hit me or whatever. I was shocked.
I hate that.
Yes. So the same people, I think, maybe have grown up in that situation and are used to it. Doesn't mean it's right, but that's what they've grown up to, and that was like their culture. Mm-hmm. So I still saw it today. People should mind their own business. Live in glass houses. My mama told me if I hit a man, then I should have the nerve to get hit by a man back.
I'm going to weigh in on that. I have to weigh in on that. Mm-hmm. The thing that I said at the end of the show today is that, Janae Palmer is upset with the media. I can relate. I understand that it's extremely difficult to have your personal life dragged through the media. But I will say this, until these incidents start coming to light, until they become not hidden, nothing's going to change. We need stuff like this to come to light, as difficult as it is for everyone. And I'm not going to lie. I got off I got off the show today, and I cried for an hour. And it's been years since I suffered my own abuse. Abuse carries scars that you will not ever see. They're hidden deep in your soul. And we've got to do something to stop it. And we can't stop it if it remains hidden. We have to have these kinds of discussions. Now I want to pose a question to you guys. I'm going to start with you, Gwen, and then we'll go to Brad and then over to Sonja. Mm-hmm. If Roger Goodell had done what he should have done to begin with, he had to know, he had to have an inkling of what was on the video inside the elevator. And I don't want to talk about why he didn't have it or what have you. If he had done the right thing, and if he had suspended Ray Rice at least 8 months, maybe indefinitely, to begin with, would Ray Rice still be a Baltimore Raven, and would we still be here?
I think so. Because in Baltimore, everybody loves a comeback story. And if he would have done all the right things in the meantime that they have been starting to do, there's our local battered women's shelter, House of Ruth. The Ravens have partnered with them in the last few weeks. Ray and Janae have been doing things together. I think, I still can't get over Michael Vick, but he was accepted back because he got a punishment. He was in jail for 18 months. He was away for football. He served his time. Ray, everybody's outraged because he did not serve his time.
Yeah.
So if he was given that time, I think he would have accepted it. Losing football games, I think, is not even on his radar of what was the worst thing that has happened to him. Yeah. This has ruined his reputation, and he had quite a reputation in this town.
He did.
Which is why, because I've been around him many, many times. I've been around him and Janae. I've seen how, what their relationship's kind of like. I see how Ray is with kids. Football didn't matter. It was what he did with those kids that mattered. So losing football games to play in, that was nothing for him. And that's just a small, minor part of his life that he's lost.
Brad, what do you think? If Roger Goodell had done the right thing to begin with, at least an 8-game, maybe an indefinite suspension, would Ray Rice still be a Baltimore Raven, and would we be where we are today?
I actually think it's a little bit more than that, if I can just interject this. And
sure.
That, I think so much of what people's reaction to it is actually seeing the image of Ray Rice punching Janae Palmer. But there's nothing in that video image that illuminates anything that we didn't already know.
Or suspect.
We know that
yeah.
Well, it wasn't suspected at all. It was documented prior to Ray Rice's 2-game suspension. He admitted hitting her in the elevator. This is nothing. Everything that's in that video, nothing new was revealed based on that video. Nothing.
I agree with that.
Literally, no, it's a fact. It's literally nothing new. He didn't say that he slapped her, and even that there's no difference in that. We know that he hit her and knocked her out. He admitted to it, and as a result, he got a 2-game suspension. The video comes out, and now we're finding out supposedly that the NFL could have had this video and chose not to look at it.
Or maybe
the video
did.
comes, yeah, or maybe they did. So either one is unacceptable. Now the video comes out, and people see it, and their reaction to it is quite stark, quite strong. And the NFL's reaction to it is to indefinitely suspend Ray Rice, even though Ray Rice basically admitted to them everything that he did in that elevator. So that's why I think that the question that you're posing, I don't know if it necessarily matters. Because
see, what I think, I don't mean to interrupt you, but what I think is that if Roger Goodell lays the hammer down to begin with, then is the tape all that, is there that much value in bringing out the tape? Because he's already laid the hammer down. Yeah. And even if the tape comes out at that point, he can say it was 8 games, or maybe I think the fact that he did not lay a severe penalty is to begin with is what is
I think
why
right.
he's getting crucified.
I think you're right, but I also want to. I think it's also important to add this. It's not just Roger Goodell here. It's also the way the Ravens handled this. Their embracing of Ray Rice afterwards, it was disgusting. They've been deleting tweets off of their Twitter account talking about, Ray
The live
Rice
tweeting of the press conference was bad.
The live tweeting of the press conference. So the press conference in general was a fiasco. My issue here isn't so much Ray Rice and how Roger Goodell could have handled it. There was a clear, premeditated plan to hide the truth. And for someone like me, that is inexcusable. Especially with something like this. So would Ray Rice still be a Raven if Roger Goodell had suspended him indefinitely after after that incident? Yes, Ray Rice would still be a Raven. The Players Association would have sued Roger Goodell because he had no precedent to suspend anyone for domestic violence. There has been domestic violence in the NFL long before Ray Rice, and players were not suspended. Ben Roethlisberger put more than just his hands on a woman in a bathroom a few years ago. He was not suspended indefinitely or for 8 games. So these are the kinds of things that precedent. Roger Goodell did what he does. He looks at precedent and puts forth punishment. But it's
I'm
more
not so
than
sure
just
that they're not going to get sued anyway. I do want to get to Sonja, but I'm not so sure they're not going to get sued anyway because the whole precedent that they're using for the additional punishment is to say that there's new evidence. But this is not new evidence.
It's not new evidence. It's not new evidence.
Are you saying, sorry, are sued by who? By Ray?
I think that the commissioner has overstepped his bounds pursuant to the collective bargaining agreement. I do not think that he has the authority to repunish Ray Rice for the same offense.
It's worth noting, just from a procedural standpoint, they were actually asked that question because they updated the personal conduct policy to include a very broad domestic violence punishment. Which is games. So, and people asked, is that retroactive for Ray Rice? And they said, no, it's not. So this video evidence is nothing new. He did not, this is not another incident. So suspending him indefinitely, yes, if I'm a union representative, I'm suing the hell out of Roger Goodell. Wait a minute, you just had this policy. There's no new evidence here, and you're suspending one of our players indefinitely?
Yeah.
I think Ray Rice deserves it, but from a procedural standpoint, it's wrong.
Yeah, I agree. I'm very interested to see what the NFLPA does. Sonja, what about you? If the NFL does the right thing to begin with, 8 games to an indefinite suspension, is he still a Baltimore Raven, and are we where we are now?
I think he would still be a Baltimore Raven. I think we might not be where we are right now. I think that Goodell would be like, yeah, see, I had my reason. I knew, I knew that what he did was absolutely he carried her out like a rag doll. I mean, that is still gives me chills. But it's just like, I think if he had done that, suspended him indefinitely, or at least 8 games right away, that he would still be a Raven. And like you said, Gwen, people do like a comeback story, and people do like, a feel-good comeback story, kind of like a Mike Vick thing, but I don't know if there was any returning to it. And then, when you listen to what John Harbaugh said, oh, well, this was just a mistake. This was just something, that, just kind of happened. So, but we stand by our guy. It's like, really? That was just a mistake? It gives me chills. But I don't think I think he still might be a Raven if they had already gone ahead and done it. But now that, you're tacking on, is that a double jeopardy thing, like you guys were kind of saying?
Yeah, there's rumors. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
That are kind of coming from the locker room that someone had said, because everybody was taking Ray for his word. Him telling them I was defending myself, and it really wasn't as bad as what they're saying it was. So they trusted and they believed in him. And you guys have guys like Torrey Smith who's come out and said, domestic violence has, affected my life in this way, and if Ray's telling the truth, then I'm going to stand behind him. And when he had the original press conference, Tori was the one that went and rounded up all the guys and said, if you guys want to come here and you want to support our teammate, why don't you come here? But I tell you what, Tori looked absolutely exhausted yesterday when they did interview him, and he's like, it's the punishment, and that's the way it's supposed to be. And I think a lot of those guys are probably disappointed because they were led to believe that it was not as bad as it was.
Yeah.
And I think they all live on their code of conduct of that locker room, and I think it was broken.
Yeah. I do think that you raise an interesting point, Gwen. I would have to go back and actually look at the policy. If the evidence that was presented in the process of the investigation was inaccurate, that might be the loophole that the NFL needs to reopen that punishment and reissue it. So that that could be the loophole there, that they were lied to, that what they were being. It does not excuse them from not getting. Look, if they had wanted to get their hands on that videotape, they could have. They could have.
They were offered the tape.
Yeah, there's no question whatsoever. I personally, this is my opinion. We're going to wrap it up. We're going to ask Brad some actual football questions, but this is just my personal opinion. I think that they saw it. I think that they were like, oh, that's what happened. Okay, 2-game suspension sounds about right, because they don't understand the damage that this kind of thing can do. And I don't think that they understand how devastating that was. I do think that they saw it. I think somebody saw it. I don't know that Roger Goodell saw it. I think that somebody at the NFL saw this video and knew what went down in that elevator, and that the NFL issued that punishment anyway. My personal opinion. So, all right, Brad. Now I know that you've covered the Colts for a long time. You're taking a little bit of a break. I'm slightly jealous, by the way, of you getting an opportunity to just be a fan. But I know that you keep up with things. The Colts' loss of Robert Mathis, devastating to that defense.
Yes, very devastating. Though. They were going to be without him for 4 games, and this is a pretty important 4-game stretch. They just lost to the Broncos. They play the Eagles on Monday night this coming week, and then they face the Jacksonville Jaguars in Jacksonville. If the Colts start 0-3, I don't have very strong. I don't have a very strong feeling about this team. I didn't have a strong feeling about them before Robert Mathis got hurt, and what's starting to happen now in Indianapolis is you're starting to get some resentment and some negative feeling toward Chuck Pagano and Ryan Grigson, because it just seems
you read my mind. I was just getting ready to ask, are they...
You've been reading my Twitter today, because I've been all over them.
Yeah, I do read your Twitter. I do.
I've been all over the guys.
Is there trouble ahead for Grigson and Pagano? Is that how you pronounce it?
Pagano.
Calling pajamas.
No, I don't think so. To be bluntly honest with you, I've been kind of bashing them today to sort of take my mind off of the Ray Rice stuff and the Roger Goodell stuff, because I think it's easier to fall back on that than to actually deal with, which is not necessarily a good thing. Do I think that the fans are starting to turn on them? So yes, there is trouble in that regard. The one thing that they have going for them is that their owner is insane.
Yeah.
So when the owner himself, speaking of suspensions, by the way.
Yes, we should talk about that real quick.
When the owner himself is suspended, and when the owner himself has already created a distraction that adversely affects the team both on and off the field, you have a built-in excuse. And now Robert Mathis is gone, so you have a built-in excuse. So I think that that's the excuse that they'll use. In my opinion, I think Chuck Pagano is a bit of a buffoon. I think he's a clueless head coach. And Ryan Grigson has made a lot of very stupid decisions as general manager. So I think the only thing that keeps the Colts afloat is Andrew Luck, which for a lot of Colt fans, it's sort of the same old for many years. Bill Polian didn't know what he was doing the second half of his tenure there, and Jim Caldwell was pretty clueless. And Peyton Manning kept them afloat. So now it's the same old, same old. But for me, I'm a big meanie, and I don't like I don't like it when people do obviously stupid things. So I tend to get a little terse with the people in charge, because I believe the people in charge should be held accountable.
Yeah.
All right. Sonja, Gwen, do you want to ask Brad any questions about the Colts?
How's Trent Richardson? What's he doing this year? Is he going to do anything? Is he going to be the Trent Richardson we all know and love?
The feeling with Trent is that he's not as good as the Colts thought he was going to be. That the trade for him is a bust. The Colts signed another running back today, a guy that Ryan Grigson had a hand in drafting when he was with the Eagles in 2011, and a guy that Rob Chudzinski right now is the special assistant to the head coach, whatever that title means. He was the head coach of Cleveland. He was head coach of Cleveland last year, and Dion Lewis, who's the running back they just signed, was one of his running backs in Cleveland last year. So the Colts are pretty clearly looking for running backs, because if you watch Trent Richardson play against the Broncos Sunday night, Trent looked okay, but for a first-round running back, number 3 overall, and the Colts traded a first-rounder for him, you're not seeing the speed, you're not seeing the elusiveness. I think Trent Richardson is a throwback back. He would have been more effective back in the days when running backs could take the top of their head and bash their way through an offensive line. They can't do that anymore. So, guys like Emmitt Smith and guys like Craig Hayward, they made their living doing that. Earl Campbell.
I was going to say Earl Campbell.
Earl Campbell, they made their living doing that, and you can't do that anymore. So, I think Trent Richardson really is sort of a guy that's okay, but he's certainly not a feature running back, and the Colts are going to have problems showcasing them because the offense tends to stagnate when he's sort of featured within the offense. So don't take him in fantasy.
Yeah, Gwen. I dropped him in fantasy. Gwen, do you have any questions for Brad?
I'm a fan of Andrew Luck just because he keeps his head down, he plays, and he seems smart. Now, you said that you thought because the organization is owned by buffoons, basically.
and again, you're from Baltimore, so obviously you got some opinions about that.
Right.
So.
That Peyton Manning was able to run the team, basically. Do you think Andrew Luck is doing the same thing and will have the same result?
Well, I mean, I think Peyton had, for a long period of time, he had a better support system around him. I mean, Bill Polian, for his first 8 years with the Indianapolis Colts, had a tremendous support system around him, too. A lot of very talented people worked in the Indianapolis organization in the late 90s and early 2000s. The present general manager of the Jacksonville Jaguars was in a capacity there. The general manager of the San Diego Chargers was a scout for the Colts for a long time. The general manager of the Eagles now is a scout for the Colts for a very long time. So you had a lot of very talented people in the front office, in addition to coaches like Tom Moore, Tony Dungy, John Tierlick. You had a real Howard Mudd. You had a really great Leslie Frazier. So you had a really great nucleus of coaches and scouts with Peyton Manning throughout much of his career, and then it really just sort of went to crap in the later years of Peyton's time because Bill Polian just started giving more power to his son, who's kind of stupid.
Keep it real. I love it.
I miss talking to you, Brad. I do miss talking to you.
Keeping it
editorializing there at the end. So with Andrew, and in my opinion, let's throw this back even further. I think Andrew Luck's the closest thing we've seen to John Unitas in the NFL in quite some time. A lot of people used to compare Peyton with Unitas, and I didn't think it. I understood it on a talent level and on an impact on the field level, but Peyton could never run
No,
the way
no.
Unitas could run. And Andrew Luck can both run, throw, take all kinds of punishment the way Unitas can. So I think Andrew is more talented than Peyton Manning, and I think he's just as intelligent. So I think that from a quarterback standpoint, the Colts are fine. It's actually quite stupid how lucky they are. No pun intended. But with that said, Andrew's problem, and I think what fans are frustrated with, because this is going to hold him back, unlike someone like, say, Russell Wilson. He doesn't have a very good support system around him in terms of talent on the team, talent in the front office, and talent in the coaching staff. So when you don't have those things, it puts more pressure on you to play perfect. Look at Sunday night as an example. Andrew Luck had to play perfect, or at the times he was playing perfect, in order for the team to even have a chance. And at the end of the day, the Colts end up losing. They should have lost by more, if not for Andrew Luck just pulling stuff out of his hat to try and score points.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, the inherent problem with the team.
Yeah. All right. Well, we went a little bit over. I can't let you get out of here, though, without asking you.
Sure.
One game in, it's still way early. A lot of football left. But the Titans, by the way, I have not mentioned this until now, but the Tennessee Titans, sit atop the AFC South right now, numero uno. How do you see the division coming down this season?
Week one.
Hey, I will take it. Do you know how long it's been since I've been able to say that?
I think it's too early. I think that I don't know. To be honest with you, I don't know. I think from a talent standpoint, the Colts should pull out the division. I think that if the Colts trend the way I think they're trending right now, the wheels could come off. So we saw this happen with Houston last year.
Yes.
Houston was a Super Bowl contender last year. They won 2 games, and they started the season 2-0. And then they lost 14 straight. And then this past week, defensively they looked fantastic against the Washington Redskins, and they got just enough out of their offense to be successful. So I think this division is a complete crapshoot, and I think what it's going to come down to is this is just I say this literally every year about your team. Jake Locker stays healthy, you make the playoffs. Jake Locker gets hurt, you're not making the playoffs. Maybe one of your backups, maybe Metlenberger, can come in and do something, but that's really what it comes down to. And based on history, Jake Locker will get hurt, and you will not make the playoffs. It's basically about praying.
I'm knocking on wood. All right.
But here's
Brad,
my thing here with you, just to say this, is that I think your team is trending better, because it seems, just to go back to a previous theme, support system in the organization seems to be stronger. Wisenhunt's a better coach than the previous guy, and I think overall the Titans are trending up rather than down.
Well, I'm so happy to hear you say that, Brad. Well, I agree. It's a crapshoot. The division is up for grabs, I think. But I've thought that it's been up for grabs, really, for the last couple of seasons. But the Colts, with Andrew Luck, have been able to hang on largely because of Andrew Luck. And so, all right. Well, tell everybody where they can find you, Brad, and then we will take us out.
Sure. You can find me in Vancouver, British Columbia. I'm hiding out.
I'm actually jealous.
And my Twitter account is @BradWellsNFL. I'm taking a break, but by taking a break, that means I'm not writing up front, but I am doing a lot of stuff behind the scenes to mentor and help other writers either edit their stuff or push them in the right direction. A few of them are guys who cover the AFC South, and just a point that I want to make, I really appreciate you guys having me on the show tonight, especially on a night
we want you to come back, Brad. I love talking football with you.
Especially on a night like this, where all kinds of news that is extremely sensitive is talked about and discussed, and this is the kind of stuff that is a little bit scary to talk about. So I really appreciate you having me on.
Well, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
we hope that you will come back.
Sure.
We are going to say our goodbyes. I'm going to kick it over to Gwen. I'm going to start with Gwen this time to tell you guys who she is and where you can find her on Twitter. She can kick it to Sonja, and I'll take us out.
Cool. I am Gwen. You can find me on Twitter at Gwen2475. I keep it really simple. I am the official fan reporter for NFL Female for the Baltimore Ravens. And I will kick it to Sonja.
All right, everybody. I'm Sonja. I'm the official NFL female reporter for the Detroit Lions. You can find me on Twitter at mom2, 3RN. And you can also find me writing for A Good Sports Hang and, you know, me and all the other guys over there. And Sharona.
All right. Well, you can follow me on Twitter at Sports by Sharona. I am the official Titans fan reporter for NFL Female. Big shout out to Liz. You can find me also at NFL Female, www.nflfemale.com. Be sure to check out all the great articles and other happenings that are going on there. And if you want to find out all my other stuff, just hop on my personal website, sportsbysharona.com. This is the Zone Blitz. We will be back next week with another excellent show. We're going to be talking, speaking of injuries, we're going to talk about the new drug policy and all these injuries with Will Carroll, injury expert on Twitter, and fantastic writer for Bleacher Report, and Jamie Kelly, who covers the Dallas Cowboys down there in Texas. We'll talk to her a little bit about the Texas Titans game and just talk some football. We might get her to weigh into on some of these topics that we have been talking about. And if you have not forgotten, our series on women and imagery in sports is ongoing. We didn't get a chance to really talk about it tonight, but we will definitely talk about it next week. So stay tuned in. This is the Zone Blitz by NFL Female. Have a very pleasant evening.
Bye.
Bye.